All right, good morning. I'm Matt from Zog, and this is our first in a series of 365 webinars for different topics we've been getting asked a lot of information about. And on with me, I have Rafe Johnson with My365. They've been our go-to partner for any of the high-level explanation and deep dives for 365. Today, I'm going to let Rafe introduce himself. We have 30 minutes to get our discussion for OneDrive and Teams and SharePoint in place. So I think we should dive right in. Rafe, why don't you say hi and take off?
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for having me today here, Matt. I am a cloud program manager, really focusing on Microsoft 365 and teaching others, showing others how you can really use Microsoft 365 to not only increase your productivity, make your daily job easier, but also really take advantage of a lot of the tools that, if you're already using Microsoft, that you have available. You just may not know about them. You're maybe not sure how to implement them, really use them to its fullest potential. So that's where I come in. And today my goal is to really talk through the basics of SharePoint, OneDrive, touch briefly on Teams. We only have about 30 minutes, so I'm going to try not to fly by too quickly. We will try to leave some questions sometimes in the end, time at the end for those questions. So think through them. There's no dumb questions. I'll try to keep our demo today as fun and as exciting as possible. So let me know if there's any questions at the end, and let's get started. Let's do this. So for today, we're going to start out with SharePoint. And why do I like to start out with SharePoint? Well, SharePoint really becomes the infrastructure for your organization, your company, because it is not only a place where you're going to be storing all of your cloud files, it's also a beautiful place to have web pages, intranet pages, specifically for your organization to get you to where you need to go quicker, fast, within 3 clicks or less is really the goal that we're looking at. On my screen right now, you can see that I have up a demo landing page. Now, this is modern SharePoint. What I like to say is this is no longer your father's Microsoft. This is the new SharePoint Online experience. What we're seeing here is a landing page which everybody in your organization would have access to. And once they get to this page, it would then allow them to go to all of their other departments, divisions, organization sites within your Microsoft tenant to access all of the files that they need. The first thing when you look at that screen here is you might say, Rafe, this gray color is absolutely ugly. It's horrendous. Why would you ever put that gray color? And I might agree with you. It's not the prettiest. The best thing about SharePoint here is that any colors that you see, any iconography, links, images on this page can be highly customizable to fit the needs and fit the branding of your organization. So here is just our demo. We would have your banner here on the screen. We would have your logo in the upper left. So it really seems like your homepage. It's a place that you're going to want to go to, which of course helps drive adoption, integration within your current IT stack. On the top here, you're going to see a global navigation header. So we are on the landing. Everybody has access to it. From the global navigation, you can see we have different team sites. For example, there's HR sales leadership. As I mentioned before, you could name these team sites whatever you want to call them, whatever fits your organization. And rather than having 4 here, you could have 10, depending on the size of your employees, how many users you have, and how you really want to break them out. Each of these pages have their own separate document library where files are going to be stored. On top of that, there is permissions at every single level. So when I went to this page, it took maybe 2 milliseconds to load, but in the back end, it's checking my email address to make sure I have access to each of the pages. So if Matt was part of the HR team, he would be able to click on the HR link here and get into the HR files, get into the link specifically for that team. But if he wasn't a part of the sales team, for example, when he tried to click on it, it would say, sorry, you do not have access. And that pops up in a second. The reason for that is Microsoft has very well thought out granular permissions to make sure that the right eyes can see the right files, sites, and content. Scrolling on down in SharePoint, we're just looking at the graphic user interface of the page right now. You can add in web parts, here some really important ones are the virtual office. So you have your email and calendar, company and teams. This would all open in the web view. The web view is pretty similar when it comes to feature parity with the desktop apps that you're probably used to using every single day. We can change these around. We can add new links here, highly customizable, just like I was saying. We can also add in work apps. So if you're using an online CRM, maybe you're using an email system like MailChimp, we can link all of those applications here so you don't have to bookmark it. It doesn't matter which browser you use to go to the internet. All of those links that you need to get your job done are right here on the page. The links, since this page is available to everybody, since it's the intranet, your landing page, everybody would be able to see them. But let's say your HR team, if we were to go to the HR page, has their own links. You would add the HR links on that page rather than the intranet here. So then each department has their own specific place to go to find the content, the apps, the links that they need. We can even add in a team calendar. What you'll notice here, and in the question of this meeting, is what's the difference between SharePoint and Teams? And really, the quick and simple answer is they're connected. And you can see that because we're able to pull in our team calendar, our Outlook calendar right here on our intranet page. You can sync this calendar to your Outlook. So no longer the excuse, well, I didn't know when that meeting was happening. I didn't have a link to it. It was on the landing. You can go here within 2 clicks and see it. One of my favorite web parts to add is the recent documents. Why is that? Well, because if you've ever been there where you opened up a file or created a file yesterday and forgot which subfolder of a subfolder of a subfolder that file was in, I think we've all been there. It's a huge headache. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Because your files are going to be saved within SharePoint, within Microsoft's ecosystem of cloud storage, Microsoft's AI is actually going to bubble up those documents for you. And with the click of a button, you can now click on it and get right into it. Really powerful, really easy. Click on it and you're in. This is also specific to you. So if you go in, you would see your documents. If one of your colleagues went in, they would see theirs. So there really is still no overlap, and every place along the way, it's checking to make sure you have access to that file first. So no data leakage, you know exactly where it is. And you can even see which site that it's saved in. For example, this file is saved in my landing site, which is the site that we're on right now. Let's get into the fun part since we don't have much time. So other than creating this page, which is highly useful, makes everyone's life easier, behind the scenes of this graphic page that we're seeing here is the file storage aspect. You can see here that we have our team files, and team files are what you're going to be considering your shared drive. If you're currently using an on-prem server to store files, most likely you probably call that your S drive. Or if you're using Google at the moment, it would be your shared Google Suite, your Google files in there that really everybody that has access to the page would want to be able to get into and see. There's also the link below here to OneDrive. I get this question quite a bit. Well, what's the difference between the two? We have SharePoint, we have OneDrive. You may even be using OneDrive at the moment. The biggest differentiator between the two is that SharePoint is going to be your shared team files. OneDrive is going to be for your own personal work files. So a good example here would be, let's say you're working on a really important Excel document. You haven't entered all of your cells yet. You're not really ready to share it with a team yet. Go ahead, save that in your OneDrive, because by default, only you have access to that OneDrive. Once you have it in a state where you're ready to share it with a team, co-author on it, that's when you can move it to SharePoint here. And then if you were to move that Excel to the landing site, everybody in the organization would see it. Now, in our case of Excel, you probably wouldn't move it to the landing. You would probably move it to the sales site, for example. But that's the difference between the two. SharePoint, shared team files, OneDrive, own personal work files, 2 different locations to store it, but yet still connected, and you can easily move files between the two. When we go into our team files here, you'll see that I have a bunch of demo folders. I'm currently using the online version of SharePoint, which means that I could go into a folder here. I could go open up a document, and it will open in the online version. Like I mentioned before, features are pretty comparable between the online and the desktop, But if you're one of those users that say, I love my desktop version of Word, that's all I use, don't worry, Microsoft still has you covered. What you would want to do is if you go to one of the sites here, whether that's HR, landing, sales, you can sync this document library down to your device. And when I open up my File Explorer here, you will see, and I'm going to go back one level just to give you a good comparison, a one-to-one for all of the folders in SharePoint as well as on your device. So if I were to open up the same document that we did before, but using my File Explorer being synced down, it will now open in the desktop version. One change that you may see, and you may notice here, is that, Rafe, you have the status column. What is that? That looks new. And really, this is important because it shows you how your files are being stored and saved. So even though I'm syncing down the files that are saved in the cloud, secured within the Microsoft file storage servers, here you can see here that there's a blue cloud. What that means is I have the shortcuts to all of the files on my device so I can open them, but it's really not taking up any space on my C drive on my computer itself. So you could have terabytes of data within SharePoint readily available for all of the team to access, but yet here, it's not taking up any space, which is great. You can also right-click a folder, and you can say, always keep on this device. Then I'm going to get a dark green check mark here, which means that even if I don't have access to the internet, I can still open up that file, edit it. Once I reconnect to the internet, any change I make will be pushed up to SharePoint and across the organization for everybody to see. So you're really getting the flexibility of both files are still saved in the cloud. That's your source of truth, as I like to call it, but yet you can still edit the files offline. It'll automatically sync because the tool that's syncing it is bidirectional. If you've been around Microsoft for a while, you may say, well, what tool are we using to sync? The tool is actually OneDrive. So that's where some of the confusion comes in as well, where OneDrive, yes, it is your own personal work storage, but it's also the syncing tool bringing down your SharePoint files to your File Explorer. If you just cringe there when I say OneDrive is your syncing tool, I just want to point out that if you used OneDrive 8 years ago, you probably had some bad experiences. Like I mentioned before, this is not your father's Microsoft anymore. OneDrive is leaps and bounds above where it was 5 years ago. And now the syncing works very well. You can see how quickly I can get into my files, sync it up, sync it down, regardless of really how fast your internet connection is. So I love using it. You can see I have my little blue cloud here. It's up to date, good to go. And I know I'm always secure. Within the online version, and why move your files to SharePoint, well, you're going to be getting a lot of features that you probably don't even know about. One of the first that I like to highlight is, let's go to this document here, hover over it, and you'll see these 3 dots. 3 dots in the Microsoft world always means more options. So let's go ahead and click on it. From here, fourth from the bottom, you're going to get a version history. And you can see, I've done this demo a couple of times, and I have a bunch of different versions here. So we still have one source of truth document saved in the cloud, but behind it are all of these versions. Why is this important? Well, you're no longer going to have V1, V2, V3, different versions of the same document floating around the organization. You still only have one document. It's just a version history behind it. So if someone goes into that Excel document that you uploaded to SharePoint, deletes half of your rows, half of your columns, don't freak out. We have the version history. You can restore it. You also know exactly who did that dirty deed of deleting your cells, so you can go yell at them. But not really. It's probably a new system
That
for them
feature
as
has
well.
saved me so many times.
Yes, exactly. And if you try to restore a document, it's also smart enough to say, so we restored it here. Oh, and it's my demo, so of course something has to go wrong when I do it. Don't worry, when you do it, it'll create a new version for the one you had before, so you can always go back in case you restored it to the wrong version of it. On top of that, you're also going to get the ability to copy a link. Because they're all cloud saved documents, rather than downloading a file, attaching it to an email, sending it off, getting it back and forth, and now you have 100 documents and you don't know which one is the most up to date, just send that original source of truth document, copy the link to it, paste it in Teams, paste it in an email. which will allow you to co-author in real time, work on the document together, regardless of if you're using the online or if you're using the desktop version. So when you
I have a quick note on that is that we've seen a couple instances where when people ask the difference between SharePoint and OneDrive, copying links within SharePoint is wonderful, especially if it's a document used regularly. When people do it out of OneDrive and then the employee leaves the company, all those links now are defunct and no one can get to the document anymore. So it's when to use one over the other. I always use that as my example.
Exactly. Yep. So if it's a file that you know people are going to be working on, more than one, SharePoint is the place to go. Just make sure to put it in the right site. That way, if someone were to leave, it's still saved. It's still company data, company documents that others can continue working on. Makes it much easier. On top of that, if you delete a file, oh no, you accidentally deleted a file, you deleted a folder, what are you going to do? Well, by default, out of the box by using SharePoint file storage, you're going to get 90 days to easily pull that document back. That's in your first stage. You get a second stage recycle bin. When we restore it, it's going to go exactly where it was before. So you don't have to worry about losing data. We can also put in other backups to keep the files indefinitely if that's something that you're looking at. But just out of the box with your licensing, you now don't have to worry about who deleted it, where did it go. We just go to the recycle bin and bring it back. This is where I usually like to throw in a joke. If you accidentally delete a whole folder, you delete a file, let us know as soon as possible, because if we have to go dumpster diving, it's much easier to pull the files from the top of the garbage can rather than digging below it. So it happens. The safeguards are in place, which is why we love Microsoft. You can still rename the documents. You can still go ahead and alert me. So if someone edits a document, you can say, send me an email, send me a Teams message, a text even, if someone deletes a file that they weren't supposed to. So really giving you control over that file. And what I'm showing you here can also be done in that File Explorer. Makes it that easy. When you also look at files, you're going to notice that if you're using the online version, well, how do you move files? What do you do with it? If you're familiar with File Explorer, you do the exact same thing in the online here. So I can click, drag and drop a folder. It'll tell you it's now moved to that new folder and our webinar should be right there, which it is. So you still get the same type of toggles, movements that you're used to. Should be pretty easy for users in your organization to pick up and start using it, especially if you're on a PC. You may say, Rafe, what if I'm on a Mac? What can we do? You're showing it on a PC. The good news is there is a OneDrive for Mac. The syncing works just as well. It's just the files are just going to be in your Finder or in your Finder rather than your File Explorer. That's really the only difference. You're still going to get the status. You're going to get a lot of the similar iconography, which Microsoft purposely did to make sure that the features are the same across the board, which will help out if any issues were to arise. We can also create retention labels to make sure that files aren't deleted. If you need to keep files legally around for a certain number of time, we can assign those. You can even do things like add metadata. So on this folder, you'll see that I have a file status. It says in progress, final. Those are pretty easy to put in there. And it helps just to track where files, where folders are, especially if you're working with external clients, partners, and a long-term project. We can add this in here, color code it, just makes things simpler. But wait, there's more. So we talked about files in OneDrive. We talked about files in SharePoint. We talked about files in your File Explorer syncing down. There's another place you can access your files as well. And that is actually going to be within Teams. So you can see here, this is my Teams demo channel. I love using the GIFs in it. So, oh, that was yesterday's Garfield Monday. It's a Tuesday, so we're feeling much better. Within Teams, if I were to go to my 365 landing, which if you'll notice is the exact same name of the SharePoint that we were in, let me go to my files. At the same time, I'm going to go to my files here within SharePoint, go to General, and I'm going to do a comparison for you. Let me pull up both of these locations here. And just for fun, I'm also going to pull up my File Explorer. What you'll notice here is that the same folders are in all three locations. This is the power of Microsoft, that no matter where you are, your folders look exactly the same. They're constantly bi-directionally syncing, whether you're using the desktop, whether you're using the online. And if you edit any of them, it will be updated for everybody else. So this is what's going to give you the flexibility. The same thing of when I showed you before of copying the link and sending it out to your team members rather than downloading the file and uploading it. You can do that right here in Teams, copy that link, and then you can paste it in the Teams, you can paste it in the chat, and now you're co-authoring within 2 clicks rather than waiting for emails, downloading, and now you have versions floating around. I absolutely love it. You can also, within Teams, go ahead and embed websites. Hopefully this page looks pretty familiar to you. Why is that? It's the SharePoint site that we were just on before demoing. So this is where Teams comes into play, where I don't like to look at Teams as a competition to SharePoint and OneDrive. What it actually is Teams brings together all of the tools within the Microsoft world in one easy to use application. So we have our SharePoint files, we have the ability to sync, we have our SharePoint links, everything that you need within one application. You can also add your planner, which is Microsoft's project management tool. We're not going to get into that today, but just showing you all of the ways that you can put together the tools, resources on a specific page. Teams, you're also going to get individual chats. So you choose who you want to message, you message back and forth. Teams here is going to be that group. So like I was mentioning, the landing site has everybody within the organization on that page having access to it. So by posting here, everybody in the organization will be able to see it. You may freak out and say, what? Everybody can see my posts? That's only for the landing. We had our sales, we had our HR site, which would be separate teams if you wanted to communicate with a specific group. So it does break it down very easily, very nicely. You get threads rather than emails back and forth. So no more mass emailing. Put it in Teams, get a thread, no more responses to mass emails as well, which we all love, right? All of it's here. Get the GIFs, get the emojis. You can always get the rich text font as well. And you'll see here, I even got a thumbs up from one of my team members here yesterday when I posted it. So now you don't even have to respond to an email with a 5-second, saw it, done it, thank you. Give it a thumbs up, 1 click, you're good to go and off on your day work. So we're getting near the end of our half an hour here. I know I went through this quite quickly, touching on OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. Today's really just scratching the surface. We're going to have a bunch more webinars in our series here to dig in a little bit more depth, but hopefully you get the idea of what file storage looks like within Microsoft, the different tools you can use, as well as how it all connects together.
So I have one question that comes up a lot is it usually kind of starts with, okay, it sounds great. SharePoint only has 1 terabyte of data as far as the company goes, plus 10 gig per user. So for like a 20-person company, it'll have 1.2 terabytes of data available for storage. And they have like 18 terabytes of old video they want to keep, or something, really pretty heavy as far as storage goes, and it gets expensive. So what are some options that they have in order to kind of help with that? I know Microsoft's come out with some good solutions there.
Yes, great question. And the first thing I'll respond to, if there's a will, there's a way. And there's 1,000 ways to do anything within Microsoft, which is great because there are a lot of workarounds we can do. So what I recommend is within SharePoint, since it's going to be your active team files, that's where you move the documents that you probably edited in the last 2 years. So the files that are actively being worked on, that's really what you want to store within SharePoint. If you have a bunch of other data kind of lingering around, something that you're not actively working on, what I like to call cold data or cold storage, that you can put it in a OneDrive, for example. So we can create a separate OneDrive archive. You can also use Azure File Services. So it's not necessarily going to be in SharePoint, but it's in its own bin or bucket within the Azure Cloud Storage that can easily be accessible from the web page, from whatever internet browser you're using, and you can even sync them down as well. So it's really just going through your system and saying, what do we want to move here? What do we want to move there? I'm also going to throw out that if you're looking to move to Microsoft, use these tools that I'm showing you, it is the perfect time to look at your current file storage and say, what can we remove? What can we get rid of,
Yeah.
clean up? The the saying I always like to use is you put dirty data in, you're going to get dirty data out. So perfect time to review that.
And it's a yeah, no, we go through that with a lot of our clientele as far as getting that data in order, put them in the right folders. Let's remove the old stuff. So that's all part of, I think, that transition over to SharePoint. And the last part is, I know, again, if somebody does have more than 5 terabytes of data and they want to move it there, are there good options to is SharePoint powerful enough to handle larger file sets?
It is, yes. And one reason why it is SharePoint and the file structure that it's built on. And this is getting a little techie, so if it goes over your head, don't worry,
Yeah.
everybody. But SharePoint was built to be hot storage. What does that mean? Well, it's going to be actively ready for you to open it and pick it up. And it's going to be as close to you as possible so you can easily open it. There's also something called differential syncing, which is just a big phrase for saying if you have a huge file, it's only going to update the pieces that you have now changed. It's not going to push up the whole 1 gig file every single time. So
Oh, that's
Microsoft is actively working on that, putting in tools. If there are large files that you're using every single day, that's a good time to actually say right click it when you're syncing it down and always keep on your device. That way you don't have to wait for the server to pull it. It's on your device, you open it. Once you close it, it'll automatically sync up and update for everybody else using that OneDrive tool on its own time.
one more question that I see I run into a few times. What types of files is SharePoint not good for? An example we ran into is old PST files. It's go
And
ahead.
you found the one that doesn't work, Matt. So the good news is that because SharePoint's file storage system is so flexible, almost any type of file I've seen can be saved. So whether that's, of course, the Microsoft documents like Word, PowerPoint, Excel, PDFs, CAD. You can look at putting InDesign files up there, even huge, large files. And actually, Edge and SharePoint is a native CAD viewer, by the way. So if you're using some of those heavy engineering apps, they still work well. Old PSTs are one of the few that do not work. And the reason is that by moving to Microsoft, we're hoping that you're going to be using Exchange Online, using the modern secure email exchange system through Microsoft, which kind of negates the reason to have those PSTs. They also tend to be very large and really only used for archive processes. So because of that, Microsoft has moved away. They've kind of said PSTs are going the way of the dinosaurs. I'm personally all for that. But if you need that PST, you can still save it in your downloads folder. You'll save it somewhere else, just not SharePoint. But other than that, I really haven't come across any files that do not work well in SharePoint.
That is good news. I actually was that was the only example I had. Apparently, is the only one that is the
Yes.
issue. So, but that's good. I know we're at the top of the hour, so Rafe and I have worked together for a number of years now, helping organizations convert over to SharePoint and Teams and OneDrive, 365 in general. And if anybody would like to explore that discussion, just reach out to myself or Preston and at sales@zoginc.com, and we're happy to have a discussion with you and line up some time to go through the building of what a project would look like for your conversion. So thanks a lot, Rafe. I really appreciate your time today, and look forward to the additional webinars we have in the series here.
I'm excited. Thanks for having me. We'll be seeing you shortly.
See you guys.
All
Take
right. Have
care.
a wonderful day, everyone. Thanks for joining.